In the Anchorage Oceanic Control Center, a radar analyst was about to witness something impossible. What started as routine aircraft tracking took a shocking turn when they came face to face with an electronic phantom that defied the laws of physics. Avery Shaw wasn't your typical air traffic controller. For 8 years, she had spent her life watching the sky through electronic eyes, known for her ability to see patterns in data that others missed. A former Air Force signals intelligence analyst, whose flying dreams ended with a medical washout, she'd become the person who built the correlation engines that tracked aircraft across the globe. When she encountered Sprout, a cheerful medical airlift plane painted with daisies, vanishing from Alaska radar only to reappear screaming over Moscow at supersonic speeds, she had no idea she was walking into an electronic warfare attack that could trigger an international crisis. Shaw's refusal to accept the impossible would lead to a desperate race against time, politics, and the Arctic night itself. What began as a routine medical flight would become a battle between truth and manufactured intelligence. The delicate balance between two nuclear powers would hang in the balance as a small aircraft carrying life-saving medicine for a child fought through an Arctic storm, while her electronic ghost threatened to start a war based on lies and manipulated mathematics. The frozen wilderness of Alaska would never be the same after one woman's determination to prove that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones that exist only in the data until they don't. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Anchorage Oceanic Control Center smells like burnt coffee and old carpet, with just a hint of jet fuel drifting in through the ventilation system. Late afternoon in February means the sun hangs like a copper coin on the horizon, casting everything in that peculiar Arctic light that makes you forget what time it actually is. I've got my third cup of coffee steaming beside my keyboard, the monitors glowing in neat rows around the darkened room like electronic prayer candles. My name is Avery Shaw, and I watch the sky for a living. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Quigley is making his evening rounds on the ramp. He's a raven, fat, glossy, and absolutely shameless about rifling through anything that looks like it might contain food. The ground crews have learned to zip their lunch bags, but Quigley is persistent. Right now, he's eyeing a FedEx pilot's thermos like it personally insulted his mother. Still making friends with the wildlife, Shaw? I glance up to see Airman Priya Nandakumar settling into the station beside mine, her headset already around her neck and a soldering iron clipped to her console like some kind of electronic Swiss Army knife. Priya's got that methodical way of moving that screams former radio nerd. Everything deliberate, nothing wasted. Quigley's got better conversation skills than most pilots, I say, pulling up the afternoon traffic flow. The scope blooms with the usual suspects. Cargo haulers threading the polar routes, a couple of Coast Guard C-130s heading north, and scattered general aviation trying to beat the weather windows closing across western Alaska. That's when I see her. "There's Sprout," I murmur, more to myself than to Priya, but she leans over anyway. "The flower plane?" Embraer Phenom, November 7, 8 Papa Sprout. I tap the screen where the little blip crawls northwest, steady and purposeful. Painted like a kid's drawing, white fuselage with yellow daisies, and an honest-to-God smiley face on the nose. Locals call her Sprout because of the flower decals. Priya shakes her head, grinning. Only in Alaska would someone paint a jet to look like a greeting card. But there's nothing greeting card about what Sprout does. She's a flying pharmacy, converted from some tech millionaire's toy into something that matters. The aft cabin's been stripped and refitted with medical-grade cooling units and shock-mounted storage. When weather shuts down the bush strips and the scheduled carriers wave off, Sprout goes anyway. She's small enough to dance around the worst of it, fast enough to beat the closing windows. Today she's carrying pediatric chemo to a clinic in Nome that's been socked in for 3 days. I know this because Dr. Hannah Ortiz texted me an hour ago with the manifest. Hannah runs regional air medical coordination with the focused intensity of someone who's seen too many people die from bad timing. She tracks every cooler, every ampule, every minute that stands between medicine and the people who need it. ETA Nome in 47 minutes, I tell Priya, checking Sprout's ground speed against the headwind component. She's making good time considering the conditions. The weather package shows a mess building over the Seward Peninsula. Ice, wind, and the kind of visibility that turns flying into prayer. But Sprout's pilot knows these routes like a taxi driver knows city streets. Old bush hand named Chuck something or other, who volunteers his time and his fuel money because his wife beat leukemia 5 years ago, says it's his way of paying forward. My console chimes. New data feed from the FAA's system-wide information network. I scan it automatically, NOTAMs, weather updates, traffic advisories, then I freeze. Priya. Something in my voice makes her look up from her own screen. I'm staring at a conflict alert that shouldn't exist. What is it? Sprout just disappeared from radar. She frowns, fingers already dancing over her keyboard to pull up the raw data feeds. Equipment malfunction?
No. I'm checking every sensor input, every backup system, every possible source of error. She was there, then she wasn't. No emergency squawk, no radio call. Just gone. My phone buzzes. Text from an unknown number, but I recognize the format. It's from one of the open-source flight tracking networks I help maintain. The message is short and impossible. N78PS, observed, MSK 1742Z, FL410, M.92. I read it 3 times before the words sink in. Priya, look at this. She reads over my shoulder, her face going pale. Moscow? Sprout's transponder just showed up over Moscow, flight level 410, Mach 0.92. I'm already pulling up the public tracking sites, my fingers shaking slightly as I type. That's supersonic, at 41,000 feet. The flight tracking website loads, and there it is, N78PS, Sprout's tail number, blazing across the Russian airspace display at impossible speed. The little airplane icon looks cheerful and innocent as it screams over the Kremlin at 600 knots. Avery, Priya's voice is very quiet. A Phenom 300 can't go supersonic. I know. And it can't teleport from Alaska to Moscow. I know. My phone rings. Dr. Ortiz. Avery, I'm seeing conflicting reports on Sprout's position. What's your status? I clear my throat, trying to sound professional despite the cold knot forming in my stomach. Hannah, we lost radar contact with Sprout approximately 4 minutes ago, last known position about 20 miles southeast of the Diomede Islands. But her transponder signature is showing up on civilian tracking networks over Moscow. Silence. Then, that's impossible. Yes, it is. Avery, listen to me. The chemo and Sprout's cooler has a hard viability window. If it's not delivered and properly stored within the next 6 hours, it's worthless. And the patient... Her voice catches slightly. The patient can't wait for the next shipment. Another text, this one from a number I definitely recognize. Zed Whitcomb, my old mentor from my Air Force days. Before I washed out of pilot training with an eye condition that ended my flying career and sent me into the world of electronic warfare and signals intelligence. Before I became the person who watches instead of the person who flies. You seeing what I'm seeing? Tell me that's a glitch. I stare at Zed's message, then at the impossible track over Moscow, then at my radar scope where Sprout should be, but isn't. Around me, the control center is starting to stir. Other controllers are getting calls, pulling up displays, frowning at their screens. Priya's already on the phone with someone from the FAA's technical center, her voice carefully neutral as she describes what we're seeing. But I'm thinking about something else entirely. I'm thinking about the open-source tool I wrote 3 years ago, a correlation engine that pulls data from multiple sources to build a unified picture of aircraft positions, military MLAT, civilian ADS-B, secondary surveillance radar. It's used by airports and air traffic control centers around the world, sometimes with credit, sometimes without. I'm thinking about how that tool works, how it trusts certain data sources more than others, how it handles timing conflicts and position disagreements. I'm thinking about how easy it would be to fool if you knew exactly which assumptions it made about satellite timing references and signal propagation delays. I'm thinking about ionospheric ducting and electromagnetic warfare and the fact that I wrote my master's thesis on spoofing GPS timing signals for electronic warfare applications. Most of all, I'm thinking about a cheerful little airplane with daisy decals flying through an Arctic night toward a child who needs the medicine in her belly while her electronic ghost races over Moscow at impossible speed. I open a new window on my workstation and start typing commands that technically exceed my authorization level. But sometimes you have to break the rules to find the truth. Priya, I say, not looking up from my screen, I need you to patch my SDR into the sandbox network, unofficially. She doesn't ask why. That's what I like about Priya. She understands that sometimes the interesting questions come from the places where the official procedures break down. Give me 5 minutes.
Outside, Quigley has successfully opened the FedEx pilot's thermos and is now happily dunking his beak into what I assume is coffee. The pilot stands nearby, hands on his hips, looking resigned to the inevitable. I take another sip of my own coffee and mark Sprout's last known position as mathematically impossible in my private log file. Time to prove it. The side room where I do my real work doesn't officially exist on the building schematics. It's tucked between the main control floor and the break room, originally designed as storage space for outdated equipment. Now it's my laboratory. Whiteboards covered with RF propagation equations, sticky notes mapping satellite constellations, and a collection of software-defined radios that cost more than my car. The centerpiece is my spectrum analyzer, a military surplus unit that can see electromagnetic signatures from DC to daylight. Tonight, it's connected to my personal SDR array through a maze of cables that would make an IT specialist weep. Technically, none of this equipment is supposed to interface with the official networks. Technically, I'm not supposed to be using it for operational analysis. Technically, a lot of things. Sandbox is live, Priya announces, slipping through the door with her laptop. She's already got her hair tied back in work mode, and there's a suspicious absence of supervision on the main floor. I may have told Supervisor Martinez that we're running routine calibration tests. Routine, I repeat, pulling up my correlation engine's raw data feeds. Right. The first thing I check is the timing. Every ADSB message includes a timestamp based on the aircraft's GPS receiver. My tool compares these timestamps across multiple ground stations to triangulate position, but it assumes all the GPS clocks are synchronized to UTC within a few microseconds. What if they're not? I pull up Sprout's last authenticated position report from our primary radar. Time 17:38:42 UTC. Position 65.7 degrees north and 168.9 degrees west. Then I compare it to the simultaneous ADSB reports flowing through the civilian tracking networks. The positions match perfectly, the timestamps don't. Look at this, I tell Priya, highlighting the discrepancies on my screen. Every ADSB report from Sprout in the last hour shows a timing offset. Not much, we're talking microseconds, but it's systematic. She leans closer, studying the data. Clock drift? No, clock drift would be gradual, random. This is stepped, periodic. I zoom in on the timing graph, showing the characteristic sawtooth pattern. Someone is injecting a time bias into Sprout's GPS receiver or spoofing it entirely. My secure phone chirps. Incoming call from a number I don't recognize, but the caller ID shows NORAD Cheyenne Mountain. Shaw. This is Colonel Ruth Bennett, NORAD Liaison to Oceanic Control. I understand you're tracking an anomalous aircraft signature? Yes, ma'am. Aircraft November 78 Papa Sprout, showing simultaneous positions over Alaska and Moscow. I believe we're looking at a spoofing attack against ADSB timing references. Explain.
I take a breath, knowing that the next 60 seconds will either establish my credibility or mark me as a conspiracy theorist. ADS-B relies on GPS timing for position correlation. If you can inject false timing data into an aircraft's GPS receiver or spoof it from the ground using synchronized transmitters, you can make the aircraft appear to be somewhere it is not. The Moscow signature shows the classic artifacts of ionospheric skip propagation combined with time-based manipulation. Silence on the line. Then, you're saying someone hacked GPS to fake an aircraft position? I'm saying someone with access to the right equipment and knowledge of ADS-B protocols could make any aircraft appear to teleport across the globe. All they need is the target's Mode S transponder code and a sufficiently sophisticated timing attack. And you can prove this. Give me an hour with my equipment and eyes on the ground near the Diomedes. I'll show you exactly how they're doing it. Another voice cuts into the call, smooth and confident. Colonel Bennett, this is Marcus Vale from Stratospheric Defense Solutions. I've been monitoring this situation, and I have to say, Miss Shaw's explanation sounds awfully convenient. I've never heard of Marcus Vale or his company, but something about his voice makes my teeth itch. Too polished, too ready with sound bites.
Mr. Vale, Bennett says, and I can hear the carefully controlled irritation. You're not authorized for this channel. With respect, Colonel, my company has been tracking anomalous aircraft signatures for the past 6 months as part of our anti-stealth radar development program. What we're seeing tonight fits a pattern of increasingly aggressive reconnaissance flights by foreign actors, testing our response capabilities. You're suggesting the Moscow appearance is real? I interrupt. I'm suggesting that dismissing it as a spoofing attack without considering the operational implications would be dangerously naive. We have photographic evidence from multiple sources showing an unidentified aircraft over Russian airspace at supersonic speeds. Are we supposed to ignore that because the math doesn't add up? I'm already pulling up the public flight tracking feeds, scrolling through the social media posts and aviation forums where spotters share their screenshots. The images are grainy, taken through telephoto lenses from the ground, but they show something moving fast and high over Moscow. Mr. Vale, I say carefully, what you're looking at are artifacts of the same spoofing attack. The photographic evidence shows ionospheric reflections being tracked by ground-based receivers. It's not a physical aircraft, it's an electromagnetic ghost. A ghost that multiple independent tracking stations have confirmed? Yes, because they're all using the same underlying timing references that have been compromised. Bennett cuts in before Vale can respond. Ms. Shaw, I need hard evidence, not theories. Can you reproduce this effect? Yes, but I need an hour, Bennett finishes. You have it. Mr. Vale, I suggest you brief your findings through proper channels rather than eavesdropping on operational nets. The line goes quiet, except for Vale's voice, now speaking to someone else in the background. Getting ahead of this before it becomes a congressional hearing. Priya is watching me with raised eyebrows. Making friends. Apparently, I'm already composing a text message to a number in Little Diomede. But first, I need to talk to someone who can see what's actually happening up there. The message goes to Tasi Kaluk, a 17-year-old Inupiat kid who builds mapping drones from spare parts and runs her own weather monitoring network from her grandfather's house on Little Diomede Island. Tasi's got access to line-of-sight paths across the Bering Strait that no satellite can match, plus the kind of technical intuition that makes MIT recruiters weep. If there's a rogue signal somewhere in the ionosphere over the Diomedes, Tasi will find it. My phone buzzes with her reply. Wind's brutal, but I can fly. What am I looking for? 1090 MHz extended squitter with timing anomalies. Need triangulation on source. Lol, you want me to catch radio ghosts? Exactly. Give me 20 minutes to rig balloon repeater. I set the phone down and turn back to Priya, who's been watching this exchange with growing comprehension. We're really doing this, aren't we? We're about to prove that someone spoofed an aircraft's identity to fake a supersonic incursion over Moscow. We're going to try. And if we're wrong,
I look back at my spectrum analyzer, where the traces show the subtle but unmistakable signatures of manipulated timing data. Outside, the Arctic night is settling over Anchorage like a black blanket, and somewhere out in that darkness, a little airplane with flower decals is fighting headwinds and icing while carrying medicine to a child who can't wait. If we're wrong, I tell Priya, a lot of people are going to make very bad decisions based on very convincing lies. My secure phone rings again. This time the caller ID just says, Moscow. The wind over Little Diomede Island hits like a physical blow, even through the video feed on my laptop screen. Tassi Kaluk is hunched against the gale on a cliff face, her breath forming ice crystals in the glow of her headlamp as she wrestles with what appears to be a weather balloon, a baking sheet, and about 50 feet of coaxial cable. "This is either going to work brilliantly or kill me," she announces cheerfully, her voice crackling through the Starlink connection. Behind her, the lights of Big Diomede, the Russian island, twinkle across 2.5 miles of black water and diplomatic complexity. "Tassi, you don't have to," I start.
Shut up. I'm having fun." She holds up the baking sheet, which has been carefully perforated and fitted with a grid of copper tape. High-gain antenna, courtesy of my grandmother's kitchen and the Radio Shack that closed in Nome 3 years ago. The balloon will lift it to about 800 feet, and my drone will relay the signals back down. Priya leans into the video frame. "That's actually brilliant." "Thanks, I get that a lot." Tassi grins, her face flushed with cold and excitement. "Launching in 3 minutes. What exactly am I hunting for?" I check my notes, trying to translate technical specifications into something actionable for a teenager standing on an ice-covered rock in the middle of the Bering Strait. ADS-B extended squitter transmissions on 1090 MHz, but we're looking for echoes, signals that have been reflected or repeated with artificial delays. Multipath propagation. Tassi nods. "I see it all the time with my weather sensors. Signals bounce off terrain, ice formations, atmospheric layers. Creates false readings." "Exactly. But this isn't natural multipath. Someone's built a repeater system that's capturing Sprout's transponder signals and rebroadcasting them with manipulated timing data." The balloon lifts off, carrying the improvised antenna into the screaming wind. Tassi's drone follows, its camera showing the balloon as a white dot against the star-filled sky. Her equipment is a masterpiece of improvisation, modified consumer electronics duct-taped together with the kind of engineering intuition you can't teach in school. "First sweep," she announces, "I'm seeing—" "Okay, that's interesting." Her laptop screen fills with spectrograms showing RF energy across the 1090 MHz band. Most of it is routine traffic, aircraft transponders painting their positions across the North Pacific Airways. But there, clustered around a specific frequency, are the signatures I've been looking for. "Tassi, can you isolate that cluster at 1090.850? "Already on it." Her fingers fly over a keyboard that's seen better days, patched into a software-defined radio that probably cost more than most cars. "I'm seeing primary signals and what looks like, delayed echoes. Same modulation, but offset by about 43 milliseconds. 43 milliseconds. At the speed of light, that's about 13,000 kilometers. "That's the Moscow delay," I tell Priya quietly. 13,000 kilometers is roughly the Great Circle distance from Alaska to European Russia. But Tassi's found something else. I'm picking up leakage from the repeater itself. Very weak, but it's there. Bearing approximately... Hold on. She checks something on her screen. 270 degrees magnetic. That puts the source somewhere inland from Tin City. Tin City, a nearly abandoned radar station on the western tip of the Seward Peninsula, positioned perfectly to monitor traffic crossing the Bering Strait, the kind of place where someone could install a high-powered transmitter without attracting attention. "Can you get a more precise fix?" "Give me a few minutes to triangulate with the balloon position." Tassi's drone adjusts its orbit, providing multiple baselines for her direction-finding algorithm. The signal's intermittent, only transmit when it receives a matching ADS-B squitter. It's like a smart repeater that specifically targets certain aircraft transponder codes. My secure phone rings, Moscow calling again. "Shah here. This is Captain Nikolai Sokolov,
Moscow Air Defense Control. The voice is heavily accented, but precise, with the clipped cadence of someone choosing his words carefully. I believe we have mutual interest in certain radar anomaly. Captain Sokolov, I wasn't expecting. Please, we skipped diplomatic niceties. You are tracking aircraft. November 78 Papa Sprout, yes? Small civilian aircraft that appears to be violating Russian airspace at impossible speeds. That's right. I have mathematics background before military service. What I see on my displays does not obey physics. Your back-channel message through amateur radio relay, your mentor, I think, includes timing analysis that confirms my suspicions. Zed. My old mentor must have patched into the international ham radio networks using his ancient call sign to route data through the kind of informal channels that exist below the official diplomatic radar. Captain, what I'm seeing suggests a sophisticated spoofing attack against ADSB timing references. Someone is making Sprout appear to be over Moscow when she's actually lost in Arctic weather over Alaska. Yes, I understand. Question is, what do we do with this information?
There's something in his voice, a weariness maybe, or the sound of someone who's been down this road before. The aircraft showing on your displays isn't real, I tell him. It's an electromagnetic phantom created by manipulated GPS timing and ionospheric reflection. If you can delay issuing a hostile track designation. Miss Shaw, his voice drops to a whisper. I have already delayed classification for past 20 minutes. My superiors are asking questions. If you are wrong about this, people die. If I am wrong, I am fired. Through the video feed, I can see Tassi making final adjustments to her balloon-mounted antenna array. The improvised high-gain dish sways in the wind, but the signal traces on her laptop are getting clearer by the minute. Captain, give me 10 more minutes. I'm about to prove exactly how they're doing this. 10 minutes. Then I must decide whether to scramble interceptors or file report recommending psychiatric evaluation for myself. The line goes dead. I look at Priya, who's been monitoring multiple data feeds simultaneously, her face illuminated by the blue glow of cascading numbers. We're really going to do this, she says. We're going to prove that someone faked an international incident using hacked GPS and kitchen cookware. If we're right. And if we're wrong? Through the laptop screen, I watch Tassi secure the final guy lines on her aerial array, while her drone maintains perfect station keeping in winds that would ground most aircraft. The kid is 17 years old, standing on a frozen rock in the middle of nowhere, using gear she built herself to hunt electromagnetic ghosts for two people she's never met. If we're wrong, I tell Priya, we're about to become very famous for all the wrong reasons. Tassi's voice crackles through the speaker. I've got lock on the repeater source, bearing and distance confirmed. Shaw, someone's been very busy with some very expensive equipment. My phone buzzes with an incoming message from Dr. Ortiz. Sprout missed her scheduled check-in, pilot not responding to radio calls. Fuel critical. And underneath that, a text from Zed. Kids asking for her daddy. How much longer? The kid. Zed's daughter waiting in a fluorescent-lit hospital room for medicine that might not arrive in time. The human cost of pretty lies and invisible wars. I take a deep breath and open a new communication channel to NORAD, Moscow, and anyone else who needs to hear what we found. Time to kill a ghost before it starts a war. The Moscow Air Defense Center looks exactly what it is, a room designed by engineers who prioritized function over comfort. Captain Nikolai Sokolov sits at his console, watching the impossible track of N-78PS crawl across his display at 600 knots, and wonders if this is how his career ends. Not with glory, not with medals, with mathematics. The break room coffee tastes like dishwater mixed with regret,
but it's the only place in the building where he can operate his personal SDR without attracting attention. Sokolov learned long ago that asking inconvenient questions about radar returns was a fast track to irrelevance. Better to investigate privately first, then present conclusions with the weight of certainty. His laptop shows the same timing anomalies the American analyst described: GPS epoch drift, systematic phase shifts, the telltale signatures of manipulated satellite timing. He's reproduced her calculations 3 times now, getting the same result each time. The aircraft over Moscow is mathematically impossible. Nikolai, the voice belongs to Colonel Dmitry Volkov, his immediate superior, and the kind of man who sees nuance as weakness. What is status on American incursion? Investigating classification parameters. For 25 minutes, aircraft maintains course toward Moscow Center. Defense Council is asking questions. Aircraft maintains impossible course at impossible speed using impossible physics, Sokolov replies mildly. I am trying to determine which impossibility to report. Volkov's face darkens. This is the conversation Sokolov has been avoiding. The moment when his mathematical certainty collides with institutional momentum. Once the Defense Council decides something is a threat, evidence becomes inconvenient. His phone buzzes with another message from the American relay network. Clock offset confirmed. Repeater source triangulated. Stand by for proof. Sir, Sokolov says carefully, I recommend delaying hostile classification pending technical verification of target signatures. You recommend? Volkov's voice could freeze vodka. Captain, your job is to track aircraft, not to make policy recommendations.
My job is to track aircraft accurately. This target displays characteristics inconsistent with physical reality. Are you suggesting our radar systems are malfunctioning? The trap is elegant in its simplicity. Either the American aircraft is real and threatening, or Russian air defense systems are unreliable. Neither answer leads to career advancement. Sokolov thinks about the mathematics professor who taught him to distrust pretty graphs, about the wife who died while he was deployed to some forgotten radar station in Siberia, about the daughter who calls him twice a week from university in St. Petersburg, studying physics because her father taught her to love precise answers to difficult questions. Sir, I am suggesting that this target may be the result of electronic warfare techniques designed to create false radar signatures. Volkov stares at him for a long moment. Around them, other controllers monitor their scopes with the studied indifference of people who have learned not to hear inconvenient conversations. You have 5 minutes to provide technical documentation supporting your assessment, Volkov says finally. After that, I classify the track as hostile and recommend intercept. 5 minutes. Sokolov nods and returns to his workstation, fingers flying over the keyboard as he compiles the American analyst's data into a format his chain of command might accept. GPS timing correlations, ionospheric propagation models, the mathematical proof that an Embraer Phenom cannot exceed the speed of sound. His secure terminal chimes with an incoming message from an unexpected source, the American analyst herself, somehow routing through amateur radio frequencies that officially don't exist. Captain Sokolov, we have physical confirmation of repeater location and method, transmitting proof via your specified frequency. The data package that follows is elegant in its thoroughness. Signal analysis, triangulation results, photographs of equipment mounted on a decommissioned radar tower near the Alaskan coast. Most importantly, a predicted timeline showing when the ghost aircraft will disappear as ionospheric conditions change. Sokolov packages the analysis into an official technical memorandum, stamps it with his authorization code, and forwards it up the chain of command. Then he sits back and waits to learn whether truth or politics will win this particular engagement. His daughter calls as he's waiting for a response. Papa, I saw the news about the American aircraft. Are you working tonight? I am working, little star. Is it exciting? The television makes it sound very dramatic. Sokolov looks at his screen where the impossible aircraft continues its impossible journey across Russian airspace,
and thinks about how to explain electronic warfare to a 19-year-old physics student. It is complicated, but I think maybe not as dramatic as television suggests. You always say that. Remember when you told me the missile crisis was complicated, and then it turned out to be a weather balloon? He laughs despite everything. This one really is complicated. Well, just remember what you taught me about pretty graphs. What did I teach you? That the prettiest graphs usually lie the loudest. After she hangs up, Sokolov stares at his screen for another 30 seconds, then reaches for his phone to call the American analyst directly. Time to find out if truth can travel faster than politics. The conference room in the basement of the Federal Aviation Administration building has the fluorescent-lit ambiance of a place where careers go to die. I'm staring at a wall-mounted display showing Marcus Vail's presentation deck, 60 slides of colorful trajectories, threat assessments, and budget projections that paint a picture of sophisticated foreign infiltration of American airspace. It's also complete bullshit, but he's selling it beautifully. As you can see from slide 37, Vail continues, his laser pointer dancing across a map showing Sprout's alleged flight path from Alaska to Moscow. The intercept geometry and sustained supersonic speeds are consistent with advanced stealth technology we've been tracking in other theaters. Colonel Bennett sits at the head of the table, her expression carefully neutral as she watches Vail's performance. Around her, a collection of officials from various agencies lean forward with the focused attention of people who smell budget allocations. The question before us, Vail says, clicking to his next slide, is whether we treat this as an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern of increasingly aggressive reconnaissance flights designed to probe our response capabilities. Mr. Vail, I interrupt, can you explain how an Embraer Phenom 300 achieves supersonic speeds without breaking apart? He favors me with a condescending smile. Ms. Shaw, I think we need to consider the possibility that what we're tracking isn't actually an Embraer Phenom, but the transponder signature can be spoofed, as you yourself suggested. His smile sharpens. What's more likely, that someone developed sophisticated transponder cloning technology, or that they've developed aircraft performance capabilities that exceed our current understanding? It's a neat reversal, using my own spoofing theory against me. But Vail has made a critical error. He's assuming I can prove which version of spoofing is actually happening. Colonel Bennett, I say, may I demonstrate something? She gestures towards the display. Proceed. I connect my laptop to the conference room system and pull up my real-time correlation engine. This is live ADS-B data from the past hour, showing all aircraft transponder signals in the North Pacific region. The display fills with moving dots, each one representing an aircraft reporting its position via satellite-linked transponders. Most of the tracks are clean, consistent, following great circle routes between airports. But Sprout's track is different. Notice the discontinuities, I say, highlighting the anomalous data points with my cursor. Every time the Moscow signature appears, it shows position reports that violate basic physics, not just the speed, the acceleration profiles. I zoom into the timing data. Here's where it's interesting. Each supersonic position report includes a GPS timestamp that's offset from UTC by exactly 43 milliseconds. That's not random drift, it's systematic manipulation. Vail leans forward. You're suggesting someone is hacking GPS satellites. I'm suggesting someone is exploiting the fact that ADS-B position correlation assumes synchronized timing across all reporting stations. I click to the next screen showing the raw signal analysis Tassi provided from her balloon-mounted antenna array. When you correct for the artificial timing offset, the supersonic speeds disappear entirely. Murmurs around the table. I can see Bennett processing the implications while Vail's smile becomes more strained. Furthermore, I continue, we've located the source of the spoofed signals. The display switches to Tassi's photographs of the equipment installation near Tin City. High-power repeater system designed to capture legitimate transponder signals and rebroadcast them with manipulated timing data. That's all very technical, Vail says, but it doesn't explain the visual confirmations from multiple independent observers. Actually, it does. I pull up the ionospheric propagation models I've been working on for the past hour. The same technique that creates false electronic signatures also creates false visual signatures. When radio signals bounce off ionospheric layers at extreme angles, they can create apparent radar returns that look like high-speed aircraft to ground observers. My phone buzzes with a text from Dr. Ortiz. Still no contact with Sprout. Estimated fuel remaining, 47 minutes. 47 minutes. I think about Chuck, the bush pilot, fighting icing and crosswinds somewhere over the Bering Sea, probably wondering why nobody's answering his radio calls. About Zed's daughter, waiting in a hospital room for medicine that might not arrive. About all the people who make decisions based on pretty graphs instead of ugly reality. Colonel Bennett, I say, I can prove this is a spoofing attack by turning it off. Vale's expression shifts. I'm sorry. The repeater system depends on precise timing coordination between multiple transmission sites. If we can decorrelate the timing references, even briefly, the false signatures will disappear from tracking systems worldwide. And how exactly do you propose to do that? I look toward Priya, who's been quietly monitoring data feeds from her laptop in the corner. She nods slightly. Our improvised countermeasure is ready. Simple, I tell Vale. We transmit a benign interference pattern that disrupts the artificial timing synchronization without affecting legitimate GPS signals. The Moscow track should vanish within minutes. Bennett's phone rings. She glances at the caller ID and frowns. I need to take this. She steps out of the room, leaving me alone with Vale and the collection of officials who are suddenly looking less certain about their threat assessments. Miss Shaw, Vale says quietly, you're making a very serious accusation. If you're wrong. If I'm wrong, nothing changes. The Moscow track continues, and you get your lucrative anti-stealth radar contract. I meet his eyes. If I'm right, we just prevented an international incident based on fabricated intelligence. And if the real aircraft is shot down while you're playing with radio signals? The question hits like a physical blow. Because he's right. Every minute we spend debunking the ghost is another minute Sprout flies deeper into Arctic weather without support. Bennett returns, her expression grim. That was NORAD. Russian air defense has requested direct coordination on the anomalous track. They want to share technical data. Vale looks incredulous. The Russians want to coordinate? Apparently, their duty officer has concerns about the target's flight characteristics, similar concerns to Miss Shaw's. I feel a surge of relief. Sokolov came through. He's buying us time by raising the same mathematical objections on the Russian side. Colonel, give me authorization to execute the timing decorrelation. If the Moscow track is fake, it'll disappear. If it's real, nothing changes. She studies me for a long moment. And the real aircraft? We find her using conventional search and rescue methods. No ghosts, no politics, just competent people doing their jobs. Bennett nods slowly. Do it. Eielson Air Force Base sits in the middle of Alaska like a concrete promise of American air power, its runways carved from permafrost and stubbornness. Lieutenant Connor Hale stands beside his F-21 Raptor in the pre-dawn darkness, watching ground crews prep the aircraft with practiced efficiency. Hale loves moments like this. The smell of JP-8 fuel, the whine of auxiliary power units, the weight of advanced avionics and weapon systems responding to his touch. He's 28 years old, has over 400 hours in the Raptor, and once landed on glare ice during a training exercise that went viral on YouTube. The kind of pilot who looks good in photographs and knows it. Tonight he was expecting a simple intercept mission. Track the bogey over Moscow, take some gun camera footage, maybe get his name in the briefing slides. Instead, he's got some radar analyst on the secure frequency, trying to convince him that his target doesn't exist. Boomer 01, this is Anchorage Control, the voice says through his headset. Female, precise, with the kind of calm that comes from staring at screens instead of sky. I need you to understand something before you launch. Go ahead, Control. The target you're being vectored toward is an electronic phantom, a spoofed transponder signature created by manipulated GPS timing and ionospheric signal propagation. Hale checks his instruments, running through the pre-flight sequence with half his attention. Copy control. So you're saying there's no aircraft? I'm saying there are two aircraft. The Ghost over Moscow that everyone's tracking, and the real Sprout fighting weather somewhere over the Bering Sea with 43 minutes of fuel remaining. That gets his full attention. Fuel is life in the air, and 43 minutes is the kind of number that makes every pilot's stomach clench. What do you need from me, Control? I need you to be search and rescue, not intercept. The real Sprout is flying below radar coverage, probably dealing with icing and navigation issues. I can give you a search corridor based on her last known position and fuel consumption estimates. Ma'am, with respect, I'm not equipped for SAR operations. I don't have the sensors for low-altitude search, and my fuel load is optimized for high-altitude intercept. There's a pause. Then, Lieutenant, what's your call sign? Boomer 01. Your real call sign. He grins himself. Viral. Because of the ice landing video? Because of the ice landing video. That video shows a pilot with exceptional situational awareness and stick and rudder skills. That's exactly what I need right now. Someone who can thread the needle between weather and terrain while following vectors from a ground controller who's tracking electronic signatures invisible to your radar. Hale considers this. It's not the mission he briefed for, and definitely not the kind of flying that looks good in gun camera footage. But there's something about the controller's voice.
Combination of technical confidence and personal investment that makes him think she knows exactly what she's talking about. Viral copies. What's your search corridor? The data comes through his tactical display as a curved track extending northwest from the last radar contact near the Diomede Islands. It's a narrow corridor, bounded by terrain on one side and weather on the other, with fuel consumption estimates that show Sprout's options shrinking by the minute. Control, that corridor takes me pretty low over some unfriendly terrain. I know, but it's where the physics say she has to be. Hale runs the calculations in his head. Low altitude means higher fuel consumption, reduced radar coverage, and limited escape options if something goes wrong. It's the kind of flying that looks reckless to outside observers and requires absolute precision from the pilot. In other words, it's exactly the kind of challenge he lives for. Viral is airborne, he announces, feeling the Raptor's engine spool up to full power. Give me those vectors. The takeoff is routine. Military jets launch from Ilsen every day, usually heading north toward the polar training ranges. But tonight, Hale banks west toward the Bering Sea, following electronic breadcrumbs laid down by a controller he's never met. Boomer 01, be advised we're coordinating with civilian assets on the ground. You may see drone activity in your search area. Civilian drones? Local kid with some impressive improvised equipment. She's been providing signal intelligence and weather data. Hale thinks about that for a moment. He's been trained to work with AWACS controllers, satellite reconnaissance, and elaborate command and control networks. The idea of taking vectors from a teenager with homemade equipment is either reassuring or terrifying. Control, what's your confidence level in these vectors? Lieutenant, I've been tracking aircraft electronically for 8 years. Before that, I was a signals intelligence analyst in the Air Force until a medical issue ended my flying career. I know the difference between real aircraft and electronic ghosts. There's something in her voice, a personal stake that goes beyond professional duty. Hale has heard that tone before, usually from people who've had to prove themselves repeatedly in rooms full of skeptics. Copy control. Viral is established on search vector. The Bering Sea at night is a study in black and gray, with scattered ice floes catching starlight like scattered sequins. Hale flies at 800 feet above the water, low enough to see surface details, but high enough to clear the worst of the weather. His radar shows nothing but sea returns and the occasional iceberg. Control, I'm not seeing any radar contacts in the corridor. Copy. The target is likely flying below your radar horizon, possibly dealing with terrain masking. Stand by for updated vectors based on triangulation from ground assets. Ground assets.
the kid with the drones. Hale banks northeast, following a new heading that takes him along the coastline. The terrain below is a maze of inlets, peninsulas, and river valleys, perfect for hiding a small aircraft, terrible for search operations. Viral, I'm showing TCAS contact bearing 045, range approximately 12 miles. Very weak return, but the timing matches expected transponder cadence. TCAS, Traffic Collision Avoidance System. If it's picking up a transponder signal, there's definitely an aircraft out there. Control, I have possible radar contact. Intermittent, low altitude, heading, looks like northwest bound. That's her. Vector to intercept, but maintain safe separation. If she's dealing with icing, her flight characteristics may be unpredictable. Hale adjusts course, dropping to 400 feet as he closes on the weak radar return. The weather is getting worse, scattered snow showers and wind shear that makes the Raptor twitch and buck despite its advanced flight control systems. Control, contact is definitely aircraft-sized, but I'm not getting any radio response on guard frequency. Keep trying. Her radios may be compromised by electrical issues. Hale cycles through emergency frequencies, broadcasting position reports and offering assistance. For several minutes, there's nothing but static and the sound of his own engines. Then, crackling through the interference. Anyone hearing this? Electrical problems. Navigation compromised. Aircraft in distress, this is Air Force Boomer 01. I have you in sight. What is your status? A pause. Then a voice rough with fatigue and stress. Jesus, where did you come from? This is November 7-8 Papa Sprout. I've got icing on the wings, partial electrical failure, and I'm about 15 minutes from bingo fuel. 15 minutes. Hale feels his own stress level spike as he processes the implications. Sprout, I'm vectoring you toward Tin City Airfield. Distance approximately 8 miles, bearing 270. Tin City socked in, visibility 00. Stand by. Hale switches to his control frequency. Control, I've got contact with Sprout. She's 15 minutes from fuel exhaustion, dealing with icing, and the nearest airfield is below minimums. Copy, Viral. We're working on getting approach lights and emergency services to Tin City. Can you provide escort? Affirmative, but she's going to need more help than I can provide. Through his canopy, Hale can see Sprout's navigation lights, red and green strobes barely visible through the blowing snow. The little aircraft is struggling, its flight path erratic as ice accumulates on the wings and control surfaces. Sprout, Air Force Boomer 01. I'm going to provide navigation guidance to Tin City. Follow my lead and stay on frequency. Copy, Air Force. Thanks for showing up. As they turn toward the airfield, Hale realizes something has changed in his relationship with the voice from Anchorage Control. She's not just a radar operator anymore. She's the person who found a lost aircraft in impossible conditions, using nothing but mathematics and determination. Control, nice work. Just doing my job, Viral. Get her home safe. The Arctic night over the Bering Sea is black as printer ink, broken only by the aurora borealis painting green curtains across the northern horizon. From the cockpit of my F-22, the world below looks like the edge of creation. Ice, water, and emptiness stretching to infinity. Except it's not empty. Somewhere in that darkness, a small aircraft with flower decals is fighting for her life. I'm Connor Hale, call sign Viral. And 30 minutes ago, I thought I was launching on an intercept mission. Now I'm flying search and rescue for an aircraft that officially doesn't exist, taking vectors from a controller who's tracking electronic ghosts with homemade equipment. Boomer 01, this is Anchorage Control. The voice belongs to Avery Shaw, the radar analyst who somehow convinced NORAD to treat this as a spoofing incident instead of an act of war. I'm showing updated position estimates based on triangulation from multiple ground stations. Vector 268, descend to 600 feet. 600 feet over the Bering Sea at night in deteriorating weather conditions is low enough to taste the salt spray. But Shaw's been right about everything else. The ghost over Moscow, the spoofing technique, the location of the real Sprout. I trust her judgment more than my own altitude comfort zone. Copy, Control, descending to 600, turning to 268. Below me, Sprout struggles through the turbulence like a wounded bird. Chuck Morrison, her volunteer pilot, is fighting icing conditions that would challenge an airliner, let alone a light jet carrying critical medical supplies. His radio transmissions have gotten shorter and more clipped as the workload increases. Air Force, I'm showing cylinder head temperatures climbing and oil pressure dropping. This bird doesn't have much left in her. Copy, Sprout. Distance to Tin City is 4.7 miles. 4.7 miles might as well be 47 in these conditions. The weather report shows visibility dropping to near zero, crosswinds gusting to 30 knots, and ice accumulation that's already forced 2 commercial flights to divert. Control, I transmit. What's the status on approach lighting at Tin City? Emergency services are en route with portable lighting. ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes that Sprout doesn't have. I can see her navigation lights wandering left and right as Chuck fights to maintain heading and altitude. The ice is building on her wings faster than the de-icing system can handle. Air Force, I need you to try something unconventional. I'm listening. You're going to hand fly a falling leaf approach. Kill the autopilot, reduce power to minimum sustainable, and let the aircraft descend in gentle S-turns. The goal is to keep ice from building up in any one place while maintaining just enough airspeed to stay controllable. There's a pause. Then, Air Force, that's a technique for aerobatic aircraft. This is a business jet carrying medical cargo. Chuck, I say, using his first name for the first time. It's also a technique that works when everything else has failed. Trust me. Another pause, longer this time. I watch Sprout's lights waver as Chuck disengages the autopilot and begins the delicate dance between controlled flight and controlled falling. Control, I transmit on a separate frequency. What's your confidence in the Tin City approach path? Shaw's voice comes back immediately. Weather is marginal but improving. Winds are shifting from crosswind to headwind component. Surface visibility is still 0-0, but we should have ceiling around 200 feet. 200 feet. In normal conditions, that's a routine approach for an experienced pilot. But Chuck's dealing with ice, electrical problems, and fuel starvation while hand-flying an approach to an uncontrolled airfield in the middle of nowhere. Air Force, I'm showing fuel flow indicators in the red. Maybe 3 minutes of flying time remaining. 3 minutes. I do the math automatically. Distance to runway, descent rate, approach speed. It's going to be close. Chuck, you're going to make a straight-in approach to runway 09. No pattern, no go-around option. One chance to get this right. Understood. Through my forward-looking infrared system, I can see the heat signature of vehicles converging on Tin City. Emergency responders, volunteer firefighters, and what looks like half of the population of the surrounding villages. Someone down there is setting up approach lights using truck headlights and portable generators. Control, I'm seeing surface activity at the airfield. That's local support. Dr. Ortiz coordinated with village emergency services. They know what's in Sprout's cargo hold. What's in the cargo hold? Pediatric chemo for a child who can't wait for the next shipment. Zed Whitcomb's daughter, waiting in a hospital room while her medicine flies through an Arctic storm carried by volunteers who refuse to give up. The weight of that responsibility settles on my shoulders like a lead blanket. This isn't about intercepts or tactics or the kind of flying that makes for good gun camera footage. This is about people doing impossible things because someone's life depends on it. Sprout, beginning final approach. Runway in sight. I can barely see the lights myself. Scattered points of illumination in the blowing snow, marking out a gravel strip that serves the abandoned radar station and whatever hardy souls still call this place home. It's not much of a runway, but it's what we have. Chuck, you're looking good. Maintain heading, slight left correction for wind. You're going to touch down in the first third of the runway. Roger that, Air Force. Thanks for the company. I watch through FLIR as Sprout settles toward the makeshift threshold, her approach angle steeper than normal, but still within the envelope.
Chuck's flying by feel now, his instruments too compromised by ice and electrical problems to trust completely.
The landing is more controlled crash than graceful touchdown. Sprout hits hard, bounces once, then settles onto the gravel with a spray of snow and ice. Her engines spool down to idle as she rolls out, finally coming to rest about 50 feet from the end of the runway. Tin City Ground, November 7-8 Papa Sprout is down safe, shutting down engines. I circle the airfield once more, watching vehicle lights converge on the aircraft. Someone's already unloading the medical cooler, hustling it toward a waiting truck that will race through the night toward Nome. Control, this is Viral. Package delivered successfully. One very tired pilot and one intact aircraft. Shaw's voice comes back with just a hint of emotion breaking through the professional calm. Copy, Viral. Outstanding work, both of you. As I climb back to altitude and turn toward home, I think about the last hour. Following vectors from a controller I've never met, using techniques I learned in flight school but never expected to need in combat operations, working with civilian assets who built their equipment from spare parts and determination. It's not the kind of mission they write about in aviation magazines, but it's the kind that reminds you why you started flying in the first place. Control, Viral is RTB. Thanks for the vector work. Thank you for listening, Lieutenant. Behind me, Tin City fades into the Arctic night, its lights scattered like stars on black ice. Somewhere ahead, Zed Whitcomb's daughter is about to receive the medicine that will help her fight cancer. Somewhere in Moscow, a phantom aircraft has vanished from radar screens, leaving behind only questions and the fading traces of electronic warfare. And somewhere in Anchorage's era radar analyst named Avery Shaw is probably updating her correlation algorithms to prevent this kind of spoofing attack from working again. Just another night over Alaska, where the impossible happens often enough to be routine, and heroes drive pickup trucks with jury-rigged antennas. The secure conference rooms in Moscow and Washington are mirror images of each other. Windowless boxes where decisions get made by people who never have to live with the consequences. Tonight, both rooms are filled with officials who came very close to authorizing actions they'd spend the rest of their lives regretting. I'm back in Anchorage watching it all unfold through secure video feeds while Priya monitors the final phase of our improvised electronic warfare operation. On one screen, Captain Sokolov sits at a conference table surrounded by Russian air defense officials, calmly presenting the mathematical proof that their supersonic intruder was nothing more than manipulated radio signals. On another, Colonel Bennett briefs a room full of Pentagon officials on how close they came to scrambling interceptors based on fabricated intelligence. Initiating carrier null in 3, 2, 1, mark, Tassi announces from her position on Little Diomede. Even through the video link, I can see her breath steaming in the Arctic air as she makes final adjustments to her improvised signal processing equipment. The effect is immediate and dramatic. Across every flight tracking website, every air traffic control display, every social media feed that's been breathlessly reporting the supersonic incursion over Moscow, the impossible aircraft simply vanishes. One moment it's there, screaming across Russian airspace at 600 knots. The next moment, empty sky. In the Moscow conference room, I watch Sokolov's expression remain perfectly neutral as his colleagues stare at displays that suddenly show nothing but routine airline traffic. He's prepared for this moment, armed with technical documentation that explains exactly how the Phantom was created and why its disappearance proves the spoofing theory. Electromagnetic phenomenon consistent with ionospheric ducting and artificial timing manipulation, he tells the room in accented but precise English, reading from his prepared statement.
recommend immediate review of ADS-B correlation protocols and implementation of time integrity verification procedures. On the Washington feed, Marcus Vail looks like a man watching his quarterly bonus evaporate in real time. His carefully prepared slides about foreign stealth technology and the need for upgraded radar systems suddenly seem less compelling when the threat they're designed to counter no longer exists. "This is clearly a sophisticated disinformation campaign," he insists, but his voice lacks the smooth confidence from earlier. The fact that they can turn the signature on and off proves they have advanced electronic warfare capabilities. Bennett's response is dry as desert sand. "Mr. Vail, the signature disappeared because we turned off the repeater system that was creating it. A repeater system that, according to Ms. Shaw's investigation, was installed using equipment purchased by one of your subcontractors for a research demonstration that somehow went operational." The silence that follows is the sound of a defense contractor realizing that his company's name is about to appear in congressional hearings for all the wrong reasons.
My secure phone buzzes with a text from Dr. Ortiz. "Cooler delivered to Nome General. Chemo still viable. Kid's going to be fine." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling tension I didn't know I was carrying drain out of my shoulders. Zed's daughter will get her medicine. Chuck Morrison is safely on the ground. The phantom over Moscow is gone, taking with it the possibility of an international incident based on lies in mathematics. "Control, this is Viral," comes Hale's voice through the radio now 30 minutes into his flight back to Eielson. "I wanted to say something before I RTB." "Go ahead, Viral." "I've been flying fighters for 6 years. Most of that time I thought the mission was about being the pointy end of the spear. Going fast, looking good, making things explode when necessary." There's a pause, filled with the background noise of his engines. "Tonight I learned that sometimes the real mission is about listening to people who know things you don't and being willing to do the unglamorous work that actually matters." "Copy that, Viral. You did good work tonight." "We all did. Tell the kid with the balloons that she's got better situational awareness than most of my squadron mates." On the video feed from Little Diomede, I see Tanasi grin as she packs up her equipment. She's 17 years old, has never been farther from home than Nome, and just helped prevent an international crisis using a weather balloon and a baking sheet. Bennett's voice cuts through the radio chatter. "All stations, this net is now secure. Miss Shaw, excellent work. Your technical analysis prevented what could have been a very serious escalation." "Thank you, ma'am. But I had a lot of help." "Yes, you did, which brings me to my next point." Her tone becomes more formal, the voice of someone making official decisions. "I'm recommending immediate publication of an interagency bulletin on ADS-B spoofing vulnerabilities with specific technical countermeasures to prevent this type of attack. I'm also recommending establishment of a civilian-military coordination protocol for technical anomalies that might indicate electronic warfare activities." In other words, she's institutionalizing the informal network that solved tonight's crisis, making sure that the next time someone tries to fake an international incident using spoofed aircraft signatures, there are official channels for technical experts to be heard. My phone chimes with another text, this one from Sokolov. "Today, I am not fired. Also, thank you for restoring my faith in international cooperation." I type back, "Thank your daughter's physics education. She raised you right." She will be pleased to hear that her lessons about pretty graphs had geopolitical implications. As the various conference feeds begin to close down and officials return to their normal evening routines, I find myself alone in the control center with Priya and the steady electronic hum of tracking systems that never sleep. Outside, Quigley is making his final rounds of the ramp, probably looking for any dinner opportunities the day shift might have left behind. "So," Priya says, shutting down her improvised signal processing setup, "we just prevented World War III using amateur radio and kitchen equipment?" "We prevented a very expensive mistake using good engineering and international cooperation," I correct. "World War III would have required actual aircraft doing actual threatening things." Right, much less dramatic when you put it that way. But that's the thing about the truth. It's usually less dramatic than the lies, but it's what you build real solutions on. Tonight, a bunch of technical specialists chose accuracy over expedience, cooperation over competition, and boring mathematical proof over exciting political theater. Tomorrow, the world will be slightly safer because of it. 1 week later, the sun rises over Anchorage like a promise kept, painting the control center windows gold and making the coffee taste slightly less like industrial solvent. I'm back at my usual station, watching the morning traffic flow paint familiar patterns across my displays when my secure phone rings with a familiar international number. Shaw here. This is Sokolov. I have news that may interest you. Good news or bad news? Complicated news. Investigation into repeater system has identified installation crew, subcontractor working for American defense company as you suspected. I'm not surprised. Marcus Vail Stratospheric Defense Solutions had its fingerprints all over the equipment specifications, and the timing of the research demonstration that conveniently provided the tools for creating tonight's crisis was too convenient to be coincidental. What kind of legal consequences are we looking at? In Russia? Complicated. Equipment was installed on abandoned radar facility using forged permits, but installation crew has diplomatic immunity, and equipment was ostensibly for legitimate research purposes. And in the U.S.? Your Colonel Bennett has been busy. Congressional Oversight Committee has opened investigation into defense contractor practices regarding electronic warfare research. Mr. Vail's company may find government contracts more difficult to obtain in future. It's not perfect justice, but it's something. Vail bet his company's reputation on being able to spin a crisis into profit, and instead found himself explaining to congressional investigators why his research tools were being used to create fake international incidents. Sokolov, I wanted to ask you something. Why did you stick your neck out for a theory from someone you'd never met?
The pause is long enough that I wonder if the connection has dropped. Then, my daughter studies physics at university. She calls me sometimes when she has questions about her coursework. Last month she was working on a problem involving GPS timing and orbital mechanics. I helped her understand that pretty mathematics can hide ugly assumptions. And when you send timing analysis through amateur relay, I recognized elegant work built on solid assumptions. Reminded me why I became mathematician before military service. Another pause. Also, my daughter would never forgive me if I started war because I was too lazy to check arithmetic. I find myself smiling at the image of a Moscow air defense captain being kept honest by his college student daughter's physics homework. Speaking of daughters, how's Zed's kid doing? Your mentor sent message through amateur network. First round of chemotherapy went well. Doctors are optimistic. The relief hits me like a physical weight being lifted. For the past week, I've been checking my phone obsessively for updates on Zed's daughter, trying not to think about what would have happened if Sprout hadn't made it to Nome in time. That's good news. Yes, sometimes complicated situations have simple, happy endings. After Sokolov hangs up, I lean back in my chair and watch the morning traffic flow across my displays. Cargo haulers threading the polar routes, passenger airlines connecting Alaska to the lower 48, and the occasional general aviation flight carrying people and cargo to places that don't appear on most maps. There's Sprout, climbing out of Nome on her return flight to Anchorage. Chuck Morrison filed a flight plan showing routine cargo, mail, supplies, and a cooler of blood samples that need to reach the lab in Anchorage by noon. Nothing dramatic, nothing that will make the news. Just competent people doing necessary work. My personal email chimes with a message from an address I don't recognize, but the subject line makes me smile. From the kid with the balloons. Shaw got accepted to MIT early admission program with full scholarship. Admissions officers said they were impressed by my real-world application of signal processing techniques to international crisis resolution. Apparently your letter of recommendation made a difference.
Thanks for not making me sound like a crazy person with kitchen equipment. P.S. My new dorm has line of sight to Lincoln Lab. Going to build much better antenna array. Tacy. I forward the message to Priya, who immediately starts grinning. That kid's gonna terrify her professors. In the best way possible. Another message, this one from Lieutenant Hale. Ms. Shaw, wanted you to know I'm putting in for cross-training on search and rescue operations. Turns out there's more interesting flying to be done than just intercepts. Also, my squadron commander asked me to pass along that NORAD is creating a new technical liaison position for civilian specialists. Interested? I stare at that message for a long time. A technical liaison position would mean official recognition for the kind of work I've been doing in the shadows, correlating civilian and military data, investigating anomalous signatures, building bridges between the people who see the data and the people who make decisions based on it. It would also mean more meetings, more briefings, and more time spent explaining technical concepts to people who prefer simple answers to complex questions. But it would also mean that the next time someone tries to fake an international incident using spoofed electronics, there are official channels for technical truth to reach decision-makers before politics takes over. I draft a response to Hale. Tell your commander I'm interested, but I have conditions. Such as? I keep my current station and equipment, I work with the people I choose to work with, and nobody gets to edit my technical assessments for political palatability. I'll pass that along. Pretty sure they'll agree to anything after last week. The morning sun climbs higher, painting the Alaska Range in shades of gold and pink that would make postcard photographers weep with joy. Outside on the ramp, Quigley is investigating a suspicious-looking lunch bag that someone left unattended near the FedEx cargo door. My displays show the normal dance of aviation across the North Pacific. Hundreds of aircraft carrying thousands of people to places they need to be. Their positions tracked and verified by systems that are slightly more secure today than they were a week ago. It's not perfect. There are still vulnerabilities in the satellite timing networks, still ways for sophisticated attackers to spoof aircraft positions and create false radar signatures. But now there are also countermeasures, cross-checks, and protocols for investigating anomalous data before someone makes irreversible decisions based on pretty lies. Sometimes that's the best you can do, make the system slightly better, slightly more resistant to the kind of people who weaponize uncertainty for profit. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to save a little girl's life while you're doing it. 6 months later, the Anchorage Oceanic Control Center looks almost exactly the same. Same fluorescent lighting, same smell of burnt coffee, and same view of the ramp where Quigley continues his eternal war against inadequately secured lunch containers. But the technical infrastructure humming quietly behind the familiar displays has been upgraded in ways that would have prevented last winter's crisis.
I'm sitting in a conference room that actually has windows, surrounded by people whose names now appear in my phone's favorites list. Colonel Bennett joins us by secure video from NORAD. Captain Sokolov appears on another screen from Moscow, where it's already evening. Tassi connects from her MIT dorm room, where she's apparently built an antenna array that has the Lincoln laboratory engineers asking uncomfortable questions about campus RF emissions. Dr. Ortiz is here in person, having driven down from Nome for the quarterly coordination meeting that has become our informal way of keeping the civilian-military technical cooperation network healthy. Priya sits beside me with a tablet full of technical documentation, and Lieutenant Hale, now Captain Hale, appears on screen from his new posting at the Air Force's Electronic Warfare Center. First item on the agenda, Bennett begins, is the formal publication of Technical Advisory NORAD 2025-07, covering mandatory time integrity verification for all ADS-B correlation systems. The advisory is 43 pages of technical specifications, implementation guidelines, and testing procedures. Most of it is based on the countermeasures we developed during the Sprout incident, translated into the kind of official language that makes government contractors implement security measures whether they want to or not. Distribution is complete to all ICAO member states, Sokolov reports. Russian implementation is scheduled for completion by December. We have had no further incidents of phantom aircraft signatures. What about the legal side? I ask. Bennett's expression becomes grimmer. Marcus Vail's company has been barred from federal contracting for 5 years. 3 of his subcontractors are facing charges related to unauthorized installation of radio equipment on federal property. Vail himself has been surprisingly difficult to locate for questioning. Somehow, I'm not surprised that a man who made his living spinning ambiguous intelligence into lucrative defense contracts managed to disappear when the spotlight turned uncomfortably bright. On a more positive note, Dr. Ortiz interjects, the Rural Medical Airlift Coordination System has been upgraded with real-time aircraft tracking and automated backup communications. We've reduced average response time for emergency medical flights by 18%. That's the part that matters most to me, making sure that the next time a volunteer pilot like Chuck Morrison flies medicine through an Arctic storm, he has better communications and navigation support than prayer and dead reckoning. "How's the open source implementation coming?" Tassi asks from her dorm room. I pull up my laptop to show the latest version of the correlation engine I've been developing. Clock Truth module is now integrated into the base system. It automatically flags timing anomalies and cross-references multiple data sources before accepting position reports. Beta testing shows 97% accuracy in detecting spoofed signatures. And it's all open source? MIT license. Anyone can use it, modify it, integrate it into their own systems. I pause, thinking about the implications. The best defense against people weaponizing open data is making the defensive tools just as open. Captain Hale leans into his camera. "Ms. Shaw, I wanted to update everyone on the SAR coordination improvements. We've established formal protocols for civilian technical assets to provide search vectors during search operations. The next time someone needs to find a lost aircraft using improvised equipment and teenagers with balloons, there are official channels to make it happen." Speaking of official channels, Bennett says, I have an announcement. The Defense Department has approved funding for a new position, Civilian Technical Liaison for Anomalous Signal Analysis. Ms. Shaw, the job is yours if you want it. I've been expecting this offer for months, but it still feels surreal. A year ago, I was the radar operator who wrote correlation software in her spare time and occasionally got consulted when something weird showed up on the scopes. Now I'm being offered a position that would make my informal network of technical specialists into an official part of the national security apparatus. I accept, I say, with the conditions I outlined previously. Agreed. You keep your current station, you choose your own technical team, and you maintain final authority over technical assessments. After the meeting ends and the various video feeds close down, I find myself alone with Priya in the control center as the afternoon shift begins. Outside, a line of cargo haulers is waiting for takeoff clearance, carrying the usual mix of freight, mail, and passengers to places that don't appear on tourist brochures. My phone buzzes with a text from Zed. Kid's latest blood work came back clean. Oncologist says she's officially in remission, wants to be a pilot when she grows up. I forward the message to the group chat that has become our informal way of staying in touch across time zones and continents. Sokolov responds with a string of Cyrillic characters that I assume are congratulatory. Tassi sends back a rocket ship emoji and the message, "Tell her to study physics first." So, Priya says, watching me update the correlation engine's configuration files with the latest security patches, we really did it. We prevented an international incident, saved a kid's life, and built a better system for preventing future crises. We built a slightly better system, I correct. There are still vulnerabilities, still ways for people with sufficient resources and motivation to create false intelligence. But now there are also countermeasures in people whose job it is to look for anomalous patterns. And if someone tries the same trick again, I think about that question while watching the afternoon traffic flow paint familiar patterns across my displays. Commercial airlines following great circle routes between continents, cargo haulers serving the bush communities scattered across Alaska's vastness, military aircraft maintaining the routine patrols that keep the peace through visible presence. And there, climbing out of Nome toward Anchorage, the familiar transponder code of November 78 Papa Sprout, carrying her usual cargo of medical supplies and mail to communities that depend on small aircraft and volunteer pilots.
Outside, Quigley has successfully opened someone's lunch bag and is now enthusiastically investigating what appears to be a tuna sandwich. The ground crew member, whose lunch is being audited, stands nearby with the resigned expression of someone who has learned that arguing with ravens is a losing proposition. I tap on the window glass.
Quigley looks up, sees me watching, and executes what I swear is a deliberate wingtip salute before returning to his lunch inspection duties. Some things, at least, never change. My computer chimes with a notification that the latest version of the Clock Truth Correlation Engine has been downloaded from the repository for the 10,000th time. Somewhere in the world, another air traffic controller or radar operator or amateur aviation enthusiast is installing software that makes it slightly harder for the next Marcus Vail to weaponize uncertainty. It's not perfect. It's not permanent, but it's better than it was yesterday, and it's built by people who understand that truth is a community effort. Sometimes that's enough. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.